I'm Dan Smolin. I built a successful executive career in marketing and communications before becoming a top headhunter and founding my own executive search firm. Now get this, every day, mainstream media runs stories in which old school bosses and thought leaders frame your work and workplace issues in ways that are often divisive and unmeaningful. And that's just crazy. The time has come for you to answer the question, what's your work fit, so that your work and career fit who you are, how you want to live, and what you want your lasting contributions to be. What's your work fit? It answers your questions and tackles the issues that keep you up at night about advancing your career in this time of workplace revolution. So let's get started. Hey, good day, everyone. Dan Smolin from What's Your Work Fit. I hope you're having a good and successful week. And as I do every week, I want to offer my gratitude to you all, my viewers and listeners who have made What's Your Work Fit a truly wonderful experience. We are entering and have entered our fourth year of doing this show. We've changed things up a little bit. In the past 3 years, all of our shows started or originated as live shows with a live audience. Today, and for several episodes during this fall season, we're going to pre-record shows. And the reason for that is to create a better experience for some of our guests who are quite literally across the globe. So for instance, we may have somebody who is 12 or 16 or 18 hours time difference from us on the East Coast of the United States. I don't expect them to be logging into the live show at midnight their time. So we're going to try some new things. I hope it creates a better overall experience. We're going to bring more and more varied guests to the program. So let's get to it. Before we get started with our guest today, I want to make a couple asks of you. If you haven't done so already, please engage with What's Your Work Fit on the platform or platforms of your choice. We're on two. We're on LinkedIn. We do our live show on LinkedIn. We're also on the What's Your Work Fit YouTube channel. So look for those symbols where our presences are based on LinkedIn and on YouTube. Next up, join us on Substack. We have What's Your Work Fit on Substack. It's growing nicely. What I really like about this experience is it brings all of our assets under one domain, almost like a video newspaper. As you will see on the screen here, you've got summaries of posts and stories that we put up. We'll also have a link to our live and pre-recorded shows, our video clips, the audio podcast, and our archive. So check us out at dansmolin.substack.com. You can subscribe to us there. And one last thing, if you haven't done this already, if you are happy with the experience that you're getting on What's Your Work Fit, my ask to you is to tell 5 of your friends to subscribe to What's Your Work Fit on the platform or platforms of their choice. That's it for self-promotion. It is, well, let me get down here. It is my pleasure to welcome to What's Your Work Fit our guest today, Kathryn Preston. How are you, Kathryn?
I am wonderful. Dan, thank you so much for having me on today. I'm a big fan of the show.
Oh, thank you. That really means a lot, Kathryn. I'm a big fan of your work as well. Before we delve into our discussion, I want to tell you a little bit about Kathryn. She is a keynote speaker, a corporate performance coach, and a people connector who helps teams, leaders, and organizations move past the noise to have conversations that matter. More signal, less noise.
Yes, absolutely. We are hungry for that in this world, and fortunately, that's the realm I work in.
She's also dog mom to Edison,
Extraordinaire.
who I'm a big fan of because he's a ginger poodle, just like my grandpuppy.
Yeah.
So before we dig in, I'm wondering if we can delve into your backstory, Kathryn. You built a career as a healthcare practitioner, as a cleft and craniofacial orthodontist. Why did you pivot away from that work and to a profession to be a communicator, a corporate communicator, if you will, as a keynote speaker and all that entails?
Yeah, it's I think very similar to all of us. We have a lot of different facets to our lives
Right.
and things that light us up, and also in different phases and seasons of our lives. And I'll just reflect back on that first part of my career, really, and that it took 12 years of higher education to get to that point, to be able to practice and treat patients in a hospital and university setting, which I absolutely loved.
Mm-hmm.
I really loved the special needs component of healthcare. And my background is as a special needs doctor, healthcare provider.
Mm-hmm.
Background came from 4 years of dental school, 3 years of orthodontic residency, got out as an orthodontist. It was really difficult to find work, which I think we all have experienced regardless of industry that we're in. That was a number of years ago, of course, but what I always reflect back on at that point, and this was before I subspecialized in special needs care, but at that point, I was 11 years into this journey, essentially, down that one career path. And what I reflect on often and speak with others about is, you choose your career at, let's say, year one, which let's call it first year of college. And let's say you go down a path 11 years later of training. That practice landscape, that work landscape could look entirely different compared to what you got into it for at the beginning. I was envisioning at first, a boutique private practice, which fast forward 11 years wasn't really the predominant model, at least in a lot of places that I would have considered living with my family at that time. It seems to be a lot larger practices or corporate owned practices, corporate healthcare versus those smaller private practices that we remember seeing growing up. And I also remember my love of teaching, which foreshadows to what I'm doing now. But my love of teaching really got me into part-time teaching at that time. I taught at UCLA and USC and loved it. I could not wait for my teaching days to come up during the week because I really enjoyed that. But what I found with time, I did not love private practice. It probably says more about me than it does about private practice because most people love private practice. But I felt like I was too early in my career to be asking myself, is this it? I just spent 11 years to get to this point, and clearly that's too early to be saying, is this what my day is going to be looking like? And
right.
So when I was exposed in my residency training to cleft, craniofacial, and special needs care, that lit me up. It's just that I knew at the time I was living in Dallas at that time, and my now husband was still in Los Angeles, so we were going back and forth for 3 years. I was thinking, well, if I go ahead and do another year in a subspecialty fellowship, that's going to keep me away another year. And but after this time of living back in Los Angeles and seeing how I would want my career to develop, it was clear I needed to do a fellowship. So I left again. I moved to Seattle, and my husband stayed in Los Angeles. And I loved it. Up until these last 2 years, I always reflect back on that fellowship year as my favorite year of my life. I met amazing people. I worked in an amazing hospital with amazing teammates and exclusively with a population of patients and people that I loved. I loved working with kids and their families who had facial clefts, facial differences even as a result of acquired over the years, not necessarily things that they were born with. And what was really unique about how I provided care versus what you might be accustomed to seeing in a private practice is I treated patients the day they were born, if they needed, even when they didn't have teeth. And, up until adulthood, where they would need jaw surgery, most likely. And so it was a really neat spectrum of care doing that within the scope of a team. So surgeons, audiologists, speech pathologists, social workers, psychologists, you really see how integral it is for each team member to know exactly what it is, what another team member is doing, not just what they're doing, but what they do as a result of their job. And so that's where I first got my interest in team dynamics, was seeing that at play within a hospital. And fast forward to now, I've worked in several hospitals and universities and loved the patient care aspect of it. I found the other aspects behind the scenes, things that I did not necessarily want to see for the rest of my life. I wanted to see areas of my life develop that I knew I could excel in and help others excel in. And that was, how do we get people to work together better?
Wow. Good on you for being so self-aware.
I appreciate that. I think it came with a lot of struggle along the way. It certainly wasn't something overnight. And I think we all have this point in our careers where we say, I haven't done this long enough yet to say to myself, I've done it. And no matter what struggles I have right now, I'm going to keep going with it. But then you get to another point later on and you say, you know what? I'm ready for this change. I'm ready for whatever that looks like. I'm ready to start at zero again for some of us, myself included. And that's where we are now. I mean, 2 years after that transition, of course, essentially, but it's been a wonderful 2 years. I'm glad I made that change. I'm glad I had my prior career as a foundation of guiding me into what I'm doing now. But it is completely different what I do now. I don't work exclusively in healthcare. I no longer treat patients. I worked in various industries ranging from shipping and logistics to home appliances, essentially, either as a keynote speaker or corporate workshop facilitator. And I focus on communication, team engagement, and corporate culture building. And again, a lot of those, we all have this sense of compartmentalizing our lives, I think, particularly in the workplace. We think, well, I did that then, I don't do that now. But so much of what informs what I do now is what I did then. And even though it's at face value not the same thing, a lot of those lessons, my love of research and data-supported metrics, carries over into what I'm doing now. So we're all reflections of where we come from, but we are open to change. And I believe that to my core.
What I think is so amazing about what you just expressed, your career journey, which I think has gotten you to a work fit, is that to some, especially those who have been very linear in their careers, they look at your experience, most definitely mine, which I've often used the word peripatetic. It bounced all over the place. And yet I could not be here doing what I am doing, nor could you be here having not done what you did. And be able to speak to the things that you speak to without all those prior experiences done.
Yeah. Yeah. You've had such an interesting career trajectory and where you started and where you are now. And I'm sure so much of that informs even your perspective now,
Oh, it does.
for
It
sure.
does.
Yeah.
Well, let's get to the lead question here, which this week comes from our viewer, Liam. Hey, Liam, thanks so much. Kathryn, he says that, and I quote, "This old been here forever company that I work for is clinging to a top-down model where good ideas generated from the lower ranks are hardly ever recognized or tested," end quote. Further, Liam says, "Senior management here who pride themselves on their many years of experience have resisted agentic AI and embracing new ways of managing growth led by teams, two aspects which Liam has taken up upon himself to learn about intentionally out of pocket." Okay.
Mhm.
He has learned a lot from the senior executives in charge, and especially those to whom he reports, but he's also vexed. And Liam asks you, Kathryn, are years of experience still career necessary? Thanks to AI for designing exactly what I wanted, the
Yeah.
old gray-haired titan looking down on the newbie. What do you
Uh,
think? Get us started.
I love this question because I think it's so nuanced. And I'll start with saying we see in any job app or job description
Mhm.
X number of years of experience, either required or desired, however they phrase it. And usually the assumption is with years of experience comes some implied measure of skill.
Mm,
Now, I think it's an implied measure of skill. It's also workplaces, companies likely see it as a prediction of tenure as well. They look and see, well, they've been with such and such a company for 5 years or 10 years. That will likely translate over into their length of tenure with us at the very least, or their level of commitment versus if they bounced around to different jobs. We always hear that discussion of, does it look bad if I've been at this number of, in this number of opportunities versus a smaller number of opportunities? There's always that conversation that happens. But I'd say with the number of years of experience, we are not looking at them in a way that is most effective
mm,
in determining if that is truly a correct measure of skill, as well as is it truly indicative of our workplace tenure, what a company could expect from us. The reason that is because even data supports, and again, for whatever reason, we are continuing to put 7, 10, 15, whatever number of years of experience required for certain jobs, which automatically weeds out people who could be fantastic candidates for that position.
mm,
We've even seen in data that there's essentially no relationship between experience and performance. And I say that with somewhat of a caveat because, of course, with experience, maybe our confidence increases. Maybe we can do the job faster. So I don't want to set experience aside entirely because those things are also true. But keeping in mind there's such a thing as good experience, there's also such a thing as bad experience. And when we just have a blanket of we need 7 years of experience, unfortunately, that's not really an indicator of whether that experience is good experience or bad experience. So I think just leaving experience as the benchmark for whether or not someone qualifies for a position, not only, I guess, discounts what a company could have with a great hire that doesn't meet 7 years, let's say, of experience.
mm.
It also shows to candidates that it's just the number of years in the job versus, how has your experience changed your perspective over that period of time? Not like, what are you doing now that you weren't doing then? Like, let's have a richer discussion on that experience versus, oh, you have 5 years of experience, but not 7. You just off the bat don't qualify.
Right. The interesting thing about experience is that, and I had this experience, Kathryn, as a headhunter, as a recruiter, find me people who have at least 10 years of experience in the subject matter. So I know I'm hiring a subject matter expert. And to a certain degree, it was applicable, especially in digital marketing, which is an area that I worked in. You needed to have people that had understanding of how to set those programs up, how to measure them, how to monetize them, et cetera. But what that experience didn't do was answer these questions. Are you adaptable?
Mm-hmm.
Are you capable of learning throughout the rest of your career?
Yeah.
You know what I used to find with a lot of people, especially senior executives, and I hate to say it because some of these people were my friends, a little bit of coasting.
Mm-hmm.
That's what the MBA was for, right? That's what the MBA at Wharton or Cornell or wherever, Harvard Business School, that's what that was for. But that MBA didn't anticipate what was going to happen to a workplace absolutely rocked by distribution and team ideation, and most importantly, agentic AI.
Yeah.
How adaptable are you to what's about to happen? And also, do you recognize that you don't know what you don't know?
Yeah.
Are you curious?
Sure.
And typically, there is no causal relationship between experience and curiosity.
Yeah. Yeah. I would also say, to your point on that, I think with curiosity, there has to be some level of self-awareness, just to your point that you don't know everything.
Mm-hmm.
I think with curiosity, though, there's different levels of curiosity, and with experience can come more tunnel vision, in my view. Not necessarily, because I think when you have experience, you're at a crossroads. You could either go down one road that shows you a different way of doing things than what you've grown accustomed to doing over the X number of years of experience. You could also go down a different road that's like, well, I've been doing it for this long, and this is how it's done. This is the right way to do it. So you could go down this road of, to the left, let's say, that's curiosity, that's continuous learning, that's learning from others, recognizing you will never know it all, no matter what position you're in, and reflecting back on how that experience has informed what you do now, recognizing that will likely change, and that's okay. With the other path being, it's gotten me this far, nothing wrong with that, but this is the path that I'm sticking to. And I think that with experience, again, when we say that our benchmark for this job is X number of years of experience, that's doing nothing to distinguish between those two paths. You want to hire, in my view, you want to hire someone, you want to bring someone in that takes that path that's like, you know what? I can't change my years of experience. I've been in this for however long that I've been in this, whether I'm new, whether I'm more seasoned. And I've seen a lot of things, but you can't see it all. And you have to approach it with a fresh perspective. And the only way you really can do that, to your point, Dan, is with an attitude of curiosity. Mm-hmm. And I think when we get to a certain level, in some ways, because companies tend to isolate those more senior leadership individuals from people who are on lower levels of leadership or on the ground team members, we're not speaking the same language oftentimes. That's what I see. Right. And we all have a common goal. We want to get to, let's say, a better culture. But the language that's used up here at the senior leadership level to convey culture, let's say, is not necessarily the same language that they're using down here. And I think that is recipe for a lot of the continued challenges that we tend to see in communication, in engagement, and in culture building at work.
Yeah, I placed a lot of people who were incurious,
Mm-hmm.
not by intention, more by design, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so the very impressive resume would tee up the matrix, right?
Sure.
I had a headcount silo of 60 people, of whom 5 were direct reports. My roll up was this many millions of dollars in sales and that much in recurring revenue and blah, 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 blah. The old school executive didn't really think about curiosity so much, because being incurious got them to focus on that center of munificence called the roll up, how much they were selling, how much they were able to increase revenue, the number of people that they managed, the P&L structure. But curiosity to me is mission critical in the progression of what we call modern work, the future of work story.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is because the workplaces that are infused with curiosity, I know that the person, George, who works for me, he's got a baby on the way. He loves parasailing. His wife is getting her MBA, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. They become real life humans with wonderful stories. And I want to do my best to learn about them in such a way that I'm not being nosy, but I'm helping that person live a life doing work that's part of something bigger and wonderful.
Sure. And along those lines, so I have a keynote in a workshop that centers around curiosity. And I love this topic because it's taking what seems to be an abstract idea, an idealistic abstract idea, and breaking it down into actionable things organizations can do to create curiosity-driven workplaces, curiosity-driven teams. So what you're describing, what I hear, Dan, is how do I create a workplace environment for these wonderful team members that we have to feel engaged, to feel inspired, to work collaboratively with others, and have that be their work fit, with your terminology there. And the two types of curiosity that I've seen work well within workplaces that teams and leaders need to tap in their team members is epistemic curiosity and social curiosity. So epistemic curiosity is the need to know knowledge. So it's like when you click buttons on the internet. I'm terrible with terms like that. Links, buttons. So when you click links to go down the rabbit hole of something really interesting online.
Yeah.
That's epistemic curiosity. You want to learn more about that. And what's interesting about epistemic curiosity is it actually feeds the same parts of the brain as hunger and thirst. So when you're thinking about that, you think, I need to know this. Like, just 5 more minutes, honey. I'll be out for dinner in like a few more minutes. I need to keep. You're not satisfied until you learn more. So in the workplace, that could be the projects that we're working on, the themes we're exploring, the problems we're seeking to solve. We genuinely find interesting and meaningful. Now, the second part of that, the second type of curiosity to tap in the workplace is social curiosity or empathic curiosity, which is the curiosity to understand the people that you're working with and develop those relationships. In developing those relationships, that of course results in better relationships and communication. And so teams that function better are teams that communicate well. And so I think with curiosity, if we can take it from a more abstract concept and make it more definite, like in this framework, these are the epistemic curiosity centers we're going to develop within your team. That knowledge base that keeps your team members engaged in what they're doing. At the same time, we're also going to build on this social curiosity so that they're engaged with each other, with the people that they're working with, that they're doing good and meaningful work with, and marry those two things. That's a curiosity-driven team. That's a successful team. That's a functional team. And so that's my take on that. And that's what I seek to bring in that workshop specifically, because it is possible. And even in the most disengaged workplaces, it is possible. We just have to go back to remembering what are we interested in? What makes you interested in a TV show that you find fascinating, that you just want to research everything about? You know, I think it's curiosity itself is an interesting topic that some people roll their eyes at because they're like, oh, well, that's idealistic, that's abstract. But there are very definite elements of it that can be much more tangible, and they can implement themselves in the workplace. And that's why I think it's such an interesting topic.
May I offer a real life business application of curiosity? So I learned about this when Marcia and I went on tour to the Netherlands in 2019. And so, you know, you're on these tour buses for long stretches, and the tour operator sometimes will get on the PA and tell you a story. And the story that he decided to tell somewhere between The Hague and Amsterdam was the curiosity that informs the work that he does as a tour operator. And why was that important? It is that curiosity often prevented issues that were happening on the tour from becoming problems, or worse, full-blown crises. When something is still an itch, you're curious about it, and you might ask questions. Okay, what's going on here?
Sure.
And that level of curiosity got him to realize that one of our members of the tour, one of the paying customers, something was going on with her. She was losing her stuff and so forth and so on. So he gave her extra attention to make sure you got your suitcase. It's on the bus. We're not going to miss our next destination. Because, as he said, when the bad stuff happens, when something goes from issue to full-blown crisis, then it becomes reputational dynamite. It can blow up in your face, and it can have negative impacts on your reputation, in this case as a tour operator, certainly on the ROI aspects of running that business, which if somebody takes to Reddit and tells a horrible story that they made me lose my luggage and well, that could ruin you not only for that tour company, but from going on vacation anywhere. So curiosity, yes, it can seem all squishy to some people, but if applied in a certain way, it can inform a much better workplace experience. I believe that.
And there are real tangible elements to curiosity. It's not just this high level thing that, you know, a bunch of academics sit around the fire with, you know, surrounded by leather bound books talking about curiosity, and there's no applicability in real life. To your point, there clearly is, even in recreational things like traveling. But in the workplace, there are tangible aspects of curiosity. We are curious beings. But I think what's interesting about curiosity and our workplaces is we've sort of programmed out a lot of avenues for curiosity. Like, for example, in favor of protocols. Not that protocols are inherently bad. If you reflect back on my story from earlier, you know, I come from a protocol culture. I came from healthcare. It should be protocoled. We should treat patients with a very protocoled approach that's evidence-based. But in a lot of workplaces, we've sort of reduced our ability to critically think and critically evaluate. we can do that. But when our workplaces say, well, what does the protocol say? In some ways, it eliminates that opportunity to say, well, we have been doing it for this long. I think we can do it better, and this is how we do that. I think in adopting a protocol culture, we have eliminated our capacity to have a curiosity culture. And I think the real perfect match there is somewhere in the middle, where there's dedicated time for that curiosity, for creating ideas, sharing ideas, looking for ways to do things better, process improvement, and having a protected time for that. At the same time, recognizing what we have now is our protocol. This is how we're going to be doing things, but it doesn't mean that we can't do it better. So I think in the effort of efficiency, we have lost the I think the incentive, or even for people to feel that expectation of themselves, like, does this company even want me to suggest ways to do it better? I think that we're capable of doing a lot of things better. It's just that we've sort of programmed that out of the expectations in our roles.
So, I'm married to a public school educator. Marcia runs a gifted education program for middle schoolers. It's a wonderful program. I love the joy that it brings her when she has made a difference in a gifted kid's life that they can apply to something else. I mean, sometimes the kids come back and they're working for NASA. Some of them have PhDs. They're rocking it, right? But one of the things that I thought about in prep for this interview was the Leave No Child Left Behind Act that became law, I want to say 20 or more years ago. Sure. And what was that? The intention of that act was to raise the level of accreditation in teaching so that kids knew stuff, that they were prepared to know stuff, right? The unintended consequence of that, Kathryn, is that we in order to teach to the test, we had little time for critical thinking. And this would drive Marcia crazy, still does to this day. And what are the impacts of that on our current workplace? They are manifold. People who don't learn how to, or don't know how to embrace critical thinking are often at a disadvantage because they never had the permission to be creative in, well, is there another way to get to this answer? Is there another way to go about this? Is there something that I haven't thought about that maybe I could think about? Now, my wife affects a lot of that kind of critical thinking in her programs, but in general population, which is what I call the rest of the school, they don't typically do that. So kids are graduating school neurotic, having been taught to the test and having been overemphasized on the importance of grades and accreditation, and don't necessarily have the skill or the curiosity to be critical thinkers. How do you think how do you think that's played out, certainly among audience members when you're speaking? Do you pick up on some of that?
It's interesting. I think companies that bring me in, because they know this is what I speak on, this is what I work with teams on, they are prepared to have this discussion. They're prepared to have this transformation of curiosity-driven teams. They are open to having new discussions about why they have challenges in communication, in team engagement, in culture building. They're ready to move past those typical discussions that they might have considered in the past and spent time on in the past, and found that they're still not seeing those transformations that they would have anticipated. So to your question about whether I see that in the teams that I work with, I think because they know what I bring and what I do, they are open, or they are already open and receptive to to the transformation that we can have. So I wouldn't necessarily say that I see that reflected in the teams that I work with because they're already at that point. But what I can reflect back on is, so I used to, following my fellowship, I was in full-time teaching and clinical care. So I was a professor at the post-grad level and also in academic admissions. What I can say about my experience in admissions, which I think applies across the board in any industry, in any field of study, whether you're in admissions, so to speak, in the workplace as a hiring manager or in the academic sense. Oftentimes, the things that we have in mind to hire people or to give them a position within an academic class, the things that we are looking for are not necessarily reflective of what will make them successful in the job itself. So they're easily measured as a metric. Like, for example, if we're just looking at academic admissions, what's their GPA? Is it a well-known school that they went to? Which, you know, we've talked between the two of us about how I view that sort of as a false credential, and we can certainly touch on that as well. But basically, all of these things that indicate you are a good student, you know, you can pass these academic benchmarks to get to the next level. But those are not necessarily the same skills that build resilience, because you haven't even been allowed to fail in the first place, usually, to get to these academic points. You know, and I speak even from my own experience. I was pretty much a straight A student in college, with the exception of 1B in organic chemistry. And we'll never forget that one. But, you know, aside from that, I had A's throughout college. And that's because you know that in order to get to that next level, your doctorate training, you have to be the best of the best academically. That's very clear. So that didn't allow me to fail. The first time I ever failed anything, so to speak, was in my doctoral training, but it was in the lab, but it was also an experience that I had never had before. And I was thinking, oh my gosh, did I pick the wrong career for myself? You know, it was and that was in my mid-20s. If you can't even really fail until that point in your life, you haven't developed the skills that will allow you to be an effective and long-lasting healthcare provider, because things do go wrong. But those skills that make you a good person for that profession in the long run are not the skills that we necessarily select for in developing the class, as much as we try. So, long answer to your very important question about how this plays out in the workplace. It starts early in the qualities that we're selecting for, and they don't necessarily translate into success in the workplace itself.
I want to pivot to a couple different questions here. Miriam writes to you today. Kathryn, I'm hoping you can talk about bad bosses. It's hashtag time on What's Your Work Fit. She says, I've had a few, and they seem to lack two things that my good bosses have possessed. Number one is what we've talked about, curiosity. And the second is an understanding that they don't know what they don't know. And we talked about that as well. So how do we deal with bad bosses and get to a place of better engagement?
Ooh, that's a good one.
Yeah.
It's a good one for so many reasons. I think bad bosses is somewhat subjective, in that maybe the dynamic with one person is not reflective of the dynamic with another person. Right or wrong, by the way.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily mean that anything untoward is happening. I think just like anything in human nature, dynamics between people vary. And for whatever reason, sometimes you can't even put your finger on it. I'd say if it is someone that is limiting your career trajectory, that's a different conversation, versus if it's someone that you just don't see eye to eye with on projects, or you can produce more, you can do better work if you were given more latitude than what they're currently providing you. Those are different problems. So I think part of it is identifying very specifically what is the problem that you experience before labeling them as a bad boss. Maybe it's just not a good fit.
Right.
I've had my fair share of unfortunate circumstances with others as well. And I learned over time that regardless of things that I tried to do to make it better, it just wasn't a good fit. Maybe even in that time in their life as a leader, maybe they were fantastic with someone 5 years ago, but at the time that I came in, they had all these other things going on in their life that did not make them a very supportive leader for me. And so I try to give that perspective versus reflect back on and be like, they were terrible. There were certainly things that I found very traumatic in my experience as an employee under certain individuals, but I think holding on to that isn't healthy, and it's not also embracing the full picture of what a person is.
It's so interesting and so tough. So early on in my career in the agency life, which is a business for the young and stupid, because as you get older and more mindful of what good behavior is, you would say, why would I put myself in that box of scorpions, right?
Yeah.
But I had this one boss, and I was at work at our clients' status meetings, which usually were episodic, they lasted forever. And I was coming down with the flu. I was getting really sick, and this person did not allow me to leave. And I at some point, I wrote about this recently. I had to run from the room, at which point I collapsed in the men's room stall. I passed out. I was really sick. And I was stewing over this person's utter disregard for me as a human that, listen, I'm not BSing you. I really am sick. I am about to pass out. I need to get home. I need to get to a doctor. And they wouldn't let me.
Yeah.
I'm going to fast forward on this story. I got to attend this person's wedding, and I met this person's family. And you want to know something? They were, by growing up, conditioned to be indifferent to the human sufferings of others, because they were themselves treated badly.
Yeah.
And I could see it.
Yeah.
And with this person, I gained a lot of respect, but also understanding. So that really, that's to your point.
Yeah. And we don't often have the benefit of having the backstory. You happen to be able to go to the wedding, and then you're like, oh, it makes sense now why my experience was the way it was with this person.
Marcia and I were looking at each other like, oh my God, these people.
But yeah, and then it's almost like you have that closure. It wasn't you. It was entirely where they came from, their upbringing, their experience, everyone. And I think it's also a good reminder that everybody, not just you, but everybody comes into the workplace. We always hear this, leave your personal life at home. You're here to work.
Right.
Okay. But
you're still a human.
You can never truly do that, because even, let's say you have something challenging going on at home and you forget about it while you're at work, which some of us can do.
Right.
It doesn't necessarily change those long-standing dynamics and habits that you pick up as a response to these things over time, and how you talk to other people. You may forget and leave at home, the challenging thing that's happening in your relationship or with your kids. But it also doesn't mean that those habits that you've picked up aren't coming into the workplace with you every single day. And I think, to go back to what we had talked about at the beginning, if you are at a crossroads in your position and you can't look and see there's a path left and right, and one of those paths shows that you can approach this differently with an open mind, then, what is all this experience for?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kathryn, I've got one more question that I want to ask before we get to the really good stuff. And it's actually something that Nick Bloom from Stanford, who writes often about the future of work and workplace, he put up. And the basic question is, what happens when younger female CEOs take the helm of the workplace? And Nick writes that according to a June 2025 Working Arrangement and Attitude Survey, companies led by younger women CEOs were 2 times as likely to support work from home. I'll call that work from anywhere or flexible work than older male CEOs. What do you make of this?
I'm not surprised by it on face value. Younger women CEOs is a different generation. You can obviously reflect on different attitudes, different priorities, different views, I think, generation to generation. But I wouldn't necessarily even just categorize it as young women versus older men, because I also know some really supportive older male CEOs that are more, not just CEOs, but executives or leaders that perhaps are more supportive than more senior female executives. So I can't really attribute it to a men versus women thing entirely. I think maybe it's a generational thing. So younger versus more senior. But even still, I'd say that perhaps those younger women CEOs, they are at a time in their life where they need that flexibility themselves.
Right.
And so I think perhaps our work attitudes and our expectations of others come from what we also want to see our lives look like right now, or what they need to look like right now. And just looking at this, and it says older male CEOs, they likely have different season of their life right now.
Right.
That
surely this is a data.
Else.
Right. Surely this is a data slice and dice. And I appreciate why Nick did this. He wanted to juxtapose the people more likely than not to promote return to the office and the old ways of doing things, going back to the way things were pre-pandemic, and the newest cohort in the executive or C-suite ranks that are increasingly women. And I think, given the sample size, 3,000 completed surveys, so he's got some statistical significance in what he's saying here. But I get your point about experience. It's not necessarily a gender thing.
Yeah.
But it most definitely is an experience thing. And if your experience was founded by the old para-industrial style of management that so many people that came out of B school embraced, versus what younger women who are acceding to the C-suite are doing, I get the point. Kathryn, this has been a lot of fun. And I hope we can get you back at some future point to continue our discussions. I think
absolutely
they have been illuminating for sure. And I love the stuff that you write on social media. To that point, if somebody wanted to learn more about you and to get in touch with you, how would they do that?
Thank you, Dan. This has been wonderful. And if your listeners are any reflection of you, I think that I would be happy to chat with anybody. So
thank you.
I would say LinkedIn, I'm on it all the time, probably to an unhealthy degree. But I'm Kathryn Preston on LinkedIn. Kathryn is Kathryn. Preston is Preston. And also my website, www.kathrynpreston.com. Kathryn, again, is Kathryn. You'd be shocked at the number of times I get all sorts of misspellings for that. So, but I'd love to be in touch with anybody, really. I learn a lot from those interactions, so I welcome anybody to reach out.
One more question to ask you, but before I ask you that, I would just ask that as we end the show, stay in the green room. I'd love to just to do a quick wrap up with you. Okay, so the last question we ask every guest is, What's your work fit? So, Kathryn, what attribute, condition, experience, place, or state of mind makes work a wonderful part of your day, doing many wonderful, meaningful things, and not the all-consuming time suck of a day? What's your work fit?
Ooh. You know, I love this question so much because I think having gone through a career change myself, I have a very specific choice or reason for doing that, I think. And it's because of it's because of work fit, to your point.
Hmm.
I'd say my work fit that I absolutely love right now is the ability to meet people that I otherwise would not have had the occasion to. You know, in
Wonderful.
different industries, my work now brings me across industries versus only in healthcare. And working one-on-one with teams, as a former professor, I love teaching. And that's what I do full time now, but I do it in different ways in different industries. And that's really my work fit, as I think that broad spectrum flexibility that is just ripe with opportunities to meet really, really cool people.
That is wonderful. I especially like the part about teaching because I cannot say this enough. Teaching is the noblest profession.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that. I would also just follow up to say, selfishly, I'm a learner and
Mm.
I am full-blown epistemic curiosity to our point earlier, that I love learning new things and even just comparing who I am now to who I was a year and a half, 2 years ago, and what I've learned as a result of this career change, and taking what I knew so well then and applying it to what I do well now.
Yeah.
I think anyone being able to see that transformation in themselves or seeing that stretch in themselves, it's something to be proud of. So I would, if anyone is in that position of like, well, what do I do next? I think you will surprise yourself with all of the things that you are capable of doing.
I love the point that you ended on. Thank you so much, Kathryn. Everybody, see you next week.
Thank you. Bye, Dan.